Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 4th. Welcome to November, everybody. I hope everybody had a great weekend, had a great Halloween. We had a great weekend of sports. I know I got up to go to Syracuse to watch the Orange take down the Hokies in an overtime comeback victory. A great game to go to. Wonderful time up in Syracuse, New York. We're going to talk about all the college football action. We'll talk about the winners and the losers from a crazy Saturday that once again saw chaos reign. We will talk about our top 25, doing it on Monday today instead of our usual rankings Tuesday. And with the deadline approaching, the NFL deadline officially tomorrow, less than 24 hours from now, we go over a list of players that I think might be on a different uniform when we go live tomorrow, as well as coaching changes and a preview of Monday Night Football. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you use either of those two things, again, that message should pop up. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 4th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today going over the winners and losers from yet another chaotic college football Saturday. Week 10 in the books, and the playoff committee comes out with it tomorrow. So we'll talk about a little bit of our losers. Starting out at number 5, the AP. Again, the playoff committee comes out with their rankings tomorrow, and as much as just on the surface level, the AP is a loser because now they're losing their, importance as the playoff committee's rankings now take over in importance over the AP ranking. We now also get to look at the AP with a much more critical eye. The thing that the playoff committee is supposed to do is ignore everything that the AP committee has done. And I know there are a million different critiques over the AP committee. It is hard to take an average of 30 writers that come together to make the AP list and get a perfect list. Everyone has their different opinions. You think a team should be number 3. I think they should be number 7. They're going to end up at 5, and that's going to mess up everything else, right? That's just how it goes. The AP is the number 5 loser this week, but not only because they're losing relevance, but also just because I think this is the toughest week so far to rank teams. My biggest takeaway from Saturday's games, and I'm not sure if everybody else feels the same way, but my biggest takeaway from Saturday's games were the fact that 25 teams in the country do not deserve to be ranked. I think I can go through, and we'll talk about it in our next segment when we actually go through the top 25 rankings that I've put together for this week. I think we can go through this, and I think I can only find about 20 teams, 19-ish teams that deserve to be ranked. The rest you just kind of throw together to complete the list. And that's where we're sitting at right now. So not only does the AP lose because they're going to lose their relevance, their national importance today in just a couple of hours, but also there was no way for them to get this right, because especially at the bottom, I don't think all those teams deserve to be in a ranked spot. Our number 5 winner, going to the other side of things, is once again Indiana. They found their way onto our winners now 3 weeks in a row. Indiana continues to shine. They get a massive win over Michigan State, 47-10, after Michigan State gives them a deficit for the first time all season. Michigan State goes up 10-0 in this game. Previously, before this game started, they had not for a single second all season come and felt a loss for a single second. That showed this team's ability to fight back. And I know it was against Michigan State. It wasn't the most quality of opponents. It wasn't the opponent you look at and you say, now they're world beaters. But Indiana coming back and scoring 47 straight points after facing, you might say, adversity for the first time this season shows a lot in this team. And there's other teams that have been rising to the top of polls, that have been up higher than Indiana, in my opinion, in the AP's opinion, and most people's opinion, that just collapsed under pressure last week especially, and we'll get to that as we move on. Indiana is our number 5 winner. Our number 4 loser, you just have to throw them in there. It's Florida State, and it is an incredible fall from grace for this team. Florida State coming after an undefeated season last year, feeling disrespected by the playoff committee, an undefeated ACC championship, not making it. They go and they reload, and now they are arguably the worst FBS team. At the very least, they are not in the top 100, and that might be the biggest season-to-season disaster that I have ever seen. How the Florida State head coach keeps his job after this season, I have no idea. Surprised he hasn't been fired yet. This is a disaster class of a season. It's crazy to me how bad Florida State has fallen, and now 10 weeks into this, I think we can finally say this might be one of the quickest collapses. And I know rosters have entire turnovers in college football, but this might be one of the most insane collapses that has ever happened in college football. They were ranked 10 heading into the season, and now they're nothing but an afterthought. They made huge power plays this offseason, especially in the ACC, trying to get out of there, saying, hey, let the guys that are worse than us come in, like in SMU, for instance, that now is fighting for a division title, an ACC title in their first year. This is just a comedy of errors for Florida State. And as their whole season has gone on, they've just been a bigger and bigger laughingstock. They flew too close to the sun, and they came crashing down. Florida State is our number 4 loser. Our number 4 winner is one-loss teams. This is another way to say chaos, I assume. I guess, right? When I'm talking about the fact that not 25 teams deserve to be ranked, that can be taken both ways. Not only does it show the lack of domination from the top teams in college football, but it gives these teams like in LSU, it gives these teams like a Texas A&M, like a Clemson, these teams that now have struggled, like an Iowa State, a team that slipped up this one time, like a Colorado that slipped up early in the season. These teams, like a Notre Dame, I can keep going, Texas, Georgia, these teams that have one loss, these teams that have slipped up one time, but other than that, been really, really good all season long. It gives them the shot that they need to come back out of this season and prove that they are a team that deserves respect. It gives them the shot that they need to come out and fix the mistake that they made. A lot of times in the past in college football, and that's something that I really like about this 12-team playoff, at least the idea, is that it gives teams the chance. Their season isn't over once they lose. Imagine if Georgia's season was over once they lost to Alabama. Why would they try against Texas? That game, that season wouldn't have meant so much. And that's what I love about this 12-team playoff, this expanded field. And we can talk about whether or not 12 is the perfect number. I think an expanded field is good. I think 12 might be the perfect number, honestly. I think 12 is a really good number. We'll see how it goes this season. But in a season as chaotic as it is, a one-loss team now is the 4th winner of this week. Our number 3 loser, we're gonna get a little bit out of the hypotheticals, these crazy little scenarios, these big groups, and just point the finger directly at Clemson. Clemson now has played, in my opinion, 2 real opponents. In 10 weeks, Clemson has played 2 real opponents. The ACC is not a division, not a conference that I'm looking at and saying, oh my God, this is the scariest conference. But the ACC is a conference that has some solid teams. They did not play a single one until this week when they ran into the Louisville Cardinals. and they looked horrendous, especially defensively. Especially defensively. The offense did not show up until the end, and even then, it was way too little, way too late. This was a team that had high expectations from me. I thought Georgia, week 1, was just a fluke. Again, taking a look at those one-loss teams that we just categorized as winners. But no, in just their second real game of the season, their second real test of the season, they now fall. And this destroys not just Clemson, but a lot of the ACC's ability to claim that they have a good opponent, a good loss, a competitive loss against a good team. And this tanks the ACC. We'll talk about it in the next segment, later on in this segment, just a little bit. But that is a brutal loss for Clemson. They should be really looked at as real frauds now, and it really goes to the fact that not 25 teams deserve to be ranked this year. Clemson, one of those teams that I don't really think deserves to be ranked, but is going to find its way onto the ranking because there's just not 25 teams better than them, honestly. It's a shame, though. Our number 3 winner, SMU. We kind of brought it up a little bit. Florida State kind of brought them in to say, see, we can share into the ACC. These guys aren't as good as us, but we'll be generous and let them in. We're not like these guys. And then SMU, undefeated in ACC play. They control their own destiny to the playoffs. If they win out, they make the college football playoffs. They are on track to make it to the ACC championship game to take on Miami after absolutely brutalizing after absolutely brutalizing Pitt in this last game. Pitt, a team that had not lost point blank period all season long, comes into this matchup, the biggest matchup of both of these two seasons. The winner of this matchup controls their destiny to the college football playoff. And SMU demolishes them. It was not close. A 30-point victory for this team is exactly what the doctor ordered, and hopefully SMU can get some of the respect that it deserves. They are number 3 winner of the week. Getting back to the losing side of things, our number 2 loser, again, a little bit of a concept here, is the ACC and the Big 12. We've talked a lot about how the power play of these conferences, the pushing and the pulling, especially in between the Power 4 conferences with the SEC and the Big 10, and of course the ACC and the Big 12, right? You have these teams that are way, way up here, these conferences that are way up here, and these conferences that are struggling to hold on to power, and then you have the Group of 5. Even lower down on the list. This is exactly what we are seeing, and it kind of sucks a little bit. I've sat here in the offseason of college football and championed the rights for these smaller conferences and championed the rights against the Big 10 and the SEC. But you kind of see where all the power comes from when you take a look at these conferences. In a 12-team playoff, as things stand, there is simply not room for 2 ACC teams and 2 Big 12 teams. The SEC and the Big 10 have set out to do exactly what they meant to do, which is hold the ACC and the Big 12 to just one bid. And unless something drastic happens down the stretch, I know the SEC is going to be a battle down the stretch now that A&M has lost this week. No one has a clear path to the top. It's just muddled. It's crazy what's going to happen at the top of the Big 10 now that Ohio State has beaten down Penn State. What's going to happen there? Indiana's still in the mix. There is simply not room for the runner-up in either of those 2 conferences with the way that the other 2 conferences is playing, and they played themselves right into the hands of the SEC and the Big 10, and honestly, it's not good for the future of the sport. This year, the ACC or the Big 12 needed to prove that they could contend with these big guys, that they have more than just one team that is worthy of being in these playoffs, and they have not done that. This week was really the nail in the coffin for that. I was still holding out hope that maybe Clemson and Miami could get in, that maybe, you could get a BYU and an Iowa State in. But instead, they falter down the stretch, and they're not really in consideration for that anymore. And now the future of college football is a little bit more uncertain than it was just 72 hours ago. But we'll see. The ACC and the Big 12 are the second biggest losers. The second biggest winner of the week is Ryan Day. So much has been said about Ryan Day this season. So much has been said about what he means for this program, how much on the hot seat he is, especially after that loss to Oregon, the way that they came out flat at the end, the bad clock management. Not all on him, but still, his failure to compete when he goes up against really good teams. 2-8 before this week against top 5 opponents, AP top 5 opponents. He goes in to Happy Valley, one of the hardest places to play, on whiteout day, college game day there. Falls to a 10-0 lead early in the first quarter and comes all the way back and does not allow the Penn State offense, crucially, to get into the end zone a single time. That Ohio State team showed me something this week. Ryan Day showed me something this week. This Ohio State team can, maybe not consistently, which is the thing I'm scared of, but at least any given week, they can show that they belong with the biggest of the boys. That was a huge win for Ryan Day, for his job security, really, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Which leads directly into our number one loser, which is James Franklin. And my God, he has put Penn State in a bind. And I'm not just going to say him. It's not just his fault, but it is a tough place for Penn State to be. They have not beaten Ohio State since 2016 or 2013. It's been a long time. 1-10 now, all time, against Ohio State is James Franklin. And Ohio State's a very good team. Normally, that's not something too surprising. You can go from, in the last 11 years of every Big Ten opponent, you can say, hey, they probably are 0-11 against Ohio State. Most teams would be, at least. Usually, Michigan is the only team in the Big Ten that can even compete with Ohio State. Not every year, but at least for a very long time. So it's not that weird that they're 1-10 in their last 11 meetings. The issue is that Penn State dominates everyone else, and they cannot get past Ohio State. And again, Ohio State is really good. And James Franklin, I think undoubtedly, is a very good coach in this league, in the NCAA, in the Big Ten. Penn State can't really fire him. They're only going to get worse if they fire him. But he cannot get over that Ohio State hump. And I don't know what it's going to take for him to get over that Ohio State hump. But whatever it is, they need to figure it out soon because their leash is running dangerously thin on James Franklin. And he is the biggest loser of this week, which takes us to our number one winner. I talk all segment about how not 25 teams deserve to be ranked, about how this has been such a muddled year filled with chaos and just insanity. Cats and dogs falling from the sky, but only one team has proven consistency. Week over week over week improvement. They have continually, outside of a couple of stumbles in the early season, like you might expect with a team that's growing pains, proven that they belong at the top, and that is Oregon. Oregon has separated themselves from the rest of the country, I think, pretty easily. The number one team. I don't think another team is even close to them. We talk about a team like Texas stumbling, those one-win teams that got a win this week in my book, the number 4 winners, like a Georgia that was previously ranked number 1, like an Alabama that was previously ranked number 1. These teams that were ranked number 1 and then faltered, Oregon has not done that. They have only solidified their grasp on it. One of the most impressive wins of the entire season over Ohio State, a really good Ohio State team. This is what you needed. This is the juggernaut of the college football season. That is the one that everyone is looking up to, and it is Oregon. They go out there and they prove why they were one of 3 teams at the beginning of the season that I thought had the ability to win it all. They have come into their own, and they have done it magnificently. Oregon is the number 1 winner of the week. But as always, our super winner of this week, as it seems to be every single season, is chaos. Chaos reigns supreme, especially in a top 25 that was super hard to fill out this week. make sure you stick around, because when we come back after this short break, we go over that top 25. I promise you there are 25 teams on here. I'll tell you where I think they start to deserve to be ranked. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows are 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 4th. Hope everyone having a really good day so far. If you are just tuning in, we have just finished going over our Week 10 winners and losers in college football. In this segment, we turn our attention to a ranking. Usually we do these on Tuesdays, but a little bit of change of format here as we're doing our top 25 for college football today to make sure we get all the NFL winner and losers in tomorrow's segment. For that, we have 25 teams off the block, and as I was talking about in our last segment, I don't think 25 teams deserve to be ranked, but we're still going to rank 25 of them for you in just 1 second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 4th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we get into our Week 11 college football top 25, as always, starting with our group of 5 top 5, a group of 5 that has been very competitive all season long, a group of 5 that still has about 6 or 7 teams that I think can still make the college football playoff if the right things go in front of them. Obviously, not all of them make our top 25, although we'll see how many make it this week. Last week we had 4, maybe we get 5 this week. At number 5, a new entrant, it's Louisiana. Louisiana, top of the Sun Belt right now, undefeated in Sun Belt play. They have looked really good. The Sun Belt is having a little bit of a down year, but still, Louisiana coming out of it has shocked me at least, been a very, very good team. The Ragin' Cajuns are coming in very sneakily. I think they're a team that could find a way to the college football playoff if just a couple teams slip up ahead of them. At number 4, it's Tulane. If you want to talk about upside in the group of 5, I think the one with the most is Tulane. Tulane, I think, has the biggest ability to just show up against a random team someday. That offense is crazy. The issue is the defense isn't quite all there. Again, I love that offense. They're the number 4 team, but a couple of tough losses against good Power 5 programs has pushed them back just a little bit. At number 3, it's Washington State. Their sole loss this season coming against Boise State, a very quality loss. Washington State continues to prove that they should be up there, continues to prove that they deserve the respect that they have just recently gotten. A very good team continuing to keep the Pac-12 name alive. They are at number 3. At number 2, it's Army. That triple option is effective as much as it has its weaknesses. They show up without their quarterback and still beat an Air Force team. Yes, that Air Force team isn't as great as it was last year. It's still a big win against a rival school, and rivalries can make crazy things happen. Which leads us to number 1 in the group of 5, top 5, and that, of course, is Boise State. Boise State continually is the number 1 team in these group of 5 rankings. They continue to dominate. The sole loss coming a one-possession loss to Oregon, the number 1 team in the nation, the team that has separated themselves from everybody else. The best loss you can possibly have, and I think just the best loss, point blank, period, in the entire country. Boise State, a very, very good team. They continue to dominate their opponents, and they control their destiny to the college football playoff in the group of 5. But without further ado, let's get into the top 25. Before we start off with our number 25 team, the South Carolina Gamecocks, I would just like to reiterate, again, I don't really think 25 teams deserve to be ranked, but for this 25 spot, there were a couple of teams that I think deserved to at least have a look at, right? There were 5 teams. We always do 5 honorable mentions. Texas Tech, Louisiana, UNLV, Syracuse, and Pitt. Pitt just fell out of the top 25. You can throw Louisville in there as well if you would like. These are the teams that I think just missed out on the top 25. But like I was saying, the number 25 team in the nation this week is South Carolina. South Carolina has been on the outside looking in for a very long time. They have been sitting in the honorable mention slot for about 4 straight weeks, coming up close against some big teams, destroying some really good teams. This is Beamer ball at its finest, and they are some of the best spoilers in the entire nation. South Carolina deserves to be ranked, and they are 25 for me. At 24, it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, again, just gets a little bit more disrespect every week. They take a tough loss to Texas. They fall out of the rankings. They're back in here after a big win versus Auburn. They're up to 24. I think 24 is a good spot for them. Again, if I had to actually start ranking teams, I will tell you when I do it. Vanderbilt, probably not the one, but if we're doing 25 teams, they should be in the top 25 for the way they've played the toughest teams close. Vanderbilt at number 24. 23 is Tulane. The Green Wave, again, we kind of went into a little bit when we did our group of 5, top 5. Their offense is good enough to hang with just about any team. The defense is where the questions start and end. But I love the Green Wave offense, and I think they're a team that on any given Saturday could beat just about anyone. 22, it's Washington State. They have been getting more and more respect. They were idle this week. Still, though, Washington State continues to prove why they belong, why they are in conversations to make the college football playoff. Same thing with Army. They have yet to really face that big competition. Their season's going to come down to a battle with Notre Dame. That is what this season's going to come down to. We will see who wins that one, but that is what we're waiting on to see if the Army Black Knights really are for real, or if they're more like their service academy counterparts in Navy, who just lost a second consecutive game. At 20, it's Clemson. My, oh my, what a fall it is for the Clemson Tigers, down 14 spots in my rankings. I know I was a lot higher on them than anybody else, so I got to bite the bullet when I'm wrong, and they are all the way down to 20. Clemson, a team that I don't think deserves to be ranked. Quite honestly, I think they're better than the 4 teams ahead of them, the 5 teams ahead of them, but I don't think they deserve to be ranked. Clemson is the most disappointing team for me this season. They looked like they had fixed a lot of their issues after coming out flat in week 1 against Georgia. And I can forgive a week 1 loss against a really good Georgia team. It's because it's week 1 and it's a really good Georgia team. But in week 10 against a Louisville team that has failed to beat the really good teams that it's faced, the Notre Dames, the SMUs, that they have, the Miamis that they have played, all of these top 10, top 15 ranked teams that they have played so far. Excuse me. Then they take Clemson out, just destroy them. It shows that Clemson is not on the same level as those three teams, and Clemson should not be ranked. They are down 14 spots to number 20, and number 19 is where I think teams should start to be ranked. That's right, I only think there are 19 teams in the country that deserved to be ranked this week, and that starts with number 19, the Colorado Buffaloes. The Buffaloes, quietly, or about as quietly as you can be for a Deion Sanders-led team, have been dominating college football. They take that one loss early on to a really good Kansas State team. A very disappointing loss by Kansas State this week. Still, Colorado, outside of that, is in the conversation in the Big 12 to win the conference title. They are in these conversations, and they deserve to be in these conversations. The defense has been playing better every single week. The offense continues to be that steamroller that we knew it was, and they have been playing better at the parts that they struggled with last season. Colorado deserves its respect. Deion deserves his respect. They are the first team I think should be ranked. 19 teams in the country deserve to be ranked, and they are one of them. And number 18, it's K-State. Kansas State, they have the head-to-head over Colorado. That's why they're still above them. A brutal loss to Houston. A Houston team that, for its credit, has been getting better and better every single week. They look like a really bad team, a team whose coach was on the hot seat early on in the season. They have turned in a couple of really solid efforts these last couple of weeks and turned that season around. They might find a way to get into a bowl, and the way they're playing, they might find a way to get into a solid bowl game right now. Kansas State, still a good team. They're prone to these mistakes, though. They have bad offensive nights. Avery Johnson, not always all the way there. We've seen them falter a little bit. They've played with fire a little bit. This is the first one where they really got burned. Hopefully this teaches them a lesson. K-State, down to number 18. At 17, it's Ole Miss, and I was ready to call Ole Miss done. I was ready to call them frauds. Then they go into Arkansas, a place that has been very tough to play this season, a place that whenever we do our game breakdowns, I say chaos reigns supreme. And an Ole Miss team that has struggled with chaos all season long comes in and drops 63 on Arkansas's head. They break records. Jackson Dart, 6 touchdowns, 500 yards. Receiver with over 285 yards and 5 touchdowns in this game. An absolute dominant performance. Some Madden video game numbers out of this game, and they show up where they needed to desperately and get their playoff chances back on track, especially with what happened at the other results out of the Big 12 and the ACC this week. At number 16, it's Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is very disappointing. I think this team is much better than they were when they played South Carolina. I think this team is much better when Connor Wegman is their quarterback. They continue to do this 2-quarterback system, and it isn't working. They need a guy that can, extend the field, yes, with his legs, but also they need a guy that can toss it with the best of them, and they just don't have that right now. Texas A&M, a very good team. They made a couple of mistakes, and they did not have the quarterback arm to get back into it. Mistakes were made, and they compounded on themselves. They fall out of the top 12. They're down 5 spots to number 16. Boise State into the top 15 at number 15 here. Boise State, again, the best group of 5 program. Ashton Genty continues to dominate. Maddox continues to show why he won that battle out of camp. This is a really good Boise State Broncos team, and it doesn't look like they're going to stop anytime soon. They're a team I think maybe even could advance in the round of the college football playoffs. We'll see, though. That is a lot of expectations to put upon them. They still need to get there first, but they look like a wrecking ball out of the group of 5 right now. At 14, it's Iowa State, a brutal loss for them to a good Texas Tech squad. Texas Tech comes in, wins at the last second. They're unable to get down the field. They end up losing by 1 in this one. What a great game plan by Texas Tech in this one. Texas Tech into our honorable mentions there. After a little bit of a slow start, Texas Tech, I think, should be getting a little bit of respect. But Iowa State, they're a team that survived some scares leading up to it. They just couldn't keep it going. They couldn't keep it together, and I think it really hurt the Big 12. It's not on them. They've had a really good season. They're going to continue to have a really good season. They still have a shot at the playoffs if they can win the conference. And I wouldn't be mad if they made it either, because Iowa State's still a very good team. But this definitely makes it a lot harder to come out of the Big 12 now. At 13, it's SMU. I was so impressed with SMU this week, dropping almost 50 points on a Pitt defense that's been really good all season long. They did not turn the ball over the way that Pitt's defense usually makes other teams turn the ball over, and that offense continued to be a fireworks show. They dominate that game. SMU up 5 spots. That's tied for the biggest rise of the week. They should get their respect. Put it on SMU. They control their own destiny of the playoffs right now, and that is incredibly impressive for a first year ACC member. At 12, Alabama. I was low on Alabama. I know they were on a bye this week. I know. They're also up 5 spots because of everything that happened around them. Alabama proved that while they're inconsistent, yes, while they make the mistakes against some opponents that they probably should have beaten, they're a team that when they lock in can beat the best team in the nation. We saw that against Georgia. We've seen them come to play against some good teams. The question is, will we get the Alabama team that's good or the Alabama team that crumbles under pressure? And we have no idea what team we're going to get every single week. Alabama up 5 spots, tied for the biggest riser to number 12. At number 11, it's Penn State, a brutal loss for them in front of their home fans, a game that they had to have to prove that this year was different. This is not the same old Penn State that we know. This is not the Penn State that can't beat the best team in the Big Ten. But a loss to Ohio State isn't the worst thing. They're still alive in the playoffs. They showed some stuff defensively, holding Ohio State to just 20 points. They had a pick 6 as well. They forced a couple of key turnovers down at the goal line to keep this thing close. If the offense can just be more consistent, which always seems to be their issue, this is a Penn State team that can beat anybody. They need to figure that out now, though. At 10, it's Tennessee. Tennessee hitting the top 10 for the first time in a while. Tennessee gets a gritty win over a Kentucky squad that has given fits to a lot of good teams. Obviously, Kentucky, a team that almost beats Georgia, a team that ends up going out there and beating Ole Miss. This is a good Kentucky squad, especially defensively, and Tennessee had to fight through it. An offense that hasn't been as good as we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year, but that defense has really stepped up for Tennessee. They do their job yet again, and Tennessee escapes with the victory, a really important one to prove that they still belong in the conversations for the playoffs. At 9, it's LSU. I love this LSU team. I think they're getting slept on by the national media a lot. The defense that they play with Garrett Nussmeier, who I think has NFL quarterback written all over him. He's not quite ready, but he's a guy that I think should get a little bit more respect, and the LSU Tigers are my number 9 team. At number 8, it's Notre Dame. Aside from a 1 loss to NIU, they have been dominant. Apparently, they talked with the NIU coach after that, and whatever they said, whatever NIU figured out, they fixed that. Notre Dame has looked like a completely different squad after the NIU game, and it has really helped them get back into the top 10 after I had taken them completely out of my top 25. Notre Dame, basically a lock for the playoffs. Again, another team that controls their own destiny. At number 7, it's BYU, an undefeated team in the Big 12. The top of the Big 12 division right now. They are another team that controls their destiny. They were on a bye week. Can't punish them. They're up a couple spots, actually up 5. Another team that really benefits from the chaos that happened this week in college football. BYU, the Cougars, a very good team. I'm a little worried about their defense because, like Pitt's, very opportunistic. And when you run into a team that didn't turn the ball over like SMU did, they might run into issues. But I like their offense more than I like Pitt's, and I think they can hold up against a team like that. At 6, number 6, the Indiana Hoosiers. That's it. Officially, Indiana has their best season ever. 9-0 for the first time in their history. Kurt Cignetti has turned this team around. A bunch of JMU transfers. He's used that transfer portal really incredibly well. They won a game without their quarterback. They've only trailed 1 time this season. That was in this game. They got punched in the mouth to open it up, and they said, we're ready. They tasted blood, and they responded with 47 straight points. Indiana has been dominant in every single game, and yes, you can talk about the strength strength of schedule not being there. But still, this is an Indiana team that I think deserves a lot of respect. They're up to number 6. At number 5, it's Texas. And I think really there's a clear top 5 teams in the league. As much as I talk about Oregon separating themselves, I think there's a clear top 5 teams. Whatever order you want it to be in, I think the top 5 teams are the top 5 teams. And Texas is number 5 in my opinion. Texas is a team that has some issues. The offensive line, clearly an issue. But they have the guys. They have the depth to deal with just about any injury. Texas is a team that if you catch them on a good day, you flat out can't beat them. They're just not going to be there all the time. We saw Georgia kind of find a way around it. When your team is talented enough, you can take on a Texas. But if your team doesn't have the Georgia kind of boys, you are in trouble. Texas at 5. At number 4, it's the Miami Hurricanes. Miami, under Cam Ward, potential Heisman winner over there, just has the offense. The defense, I have a lot of question marks with, but they can keep up with literally anybody, and we've seen that on a week-in, week-out basis. Whenever the defense gets them in trouble, Cam Ward turns it around, leads a quick touchdown drive, then leads another one. Whenever you do not score against this Miami team, that's when it's over. You need to be perfect offensively to beat this Miami Hurricanes team, and no one has done that yet. At number 3, it is Georgia. Georgia, again, a really good team. They have some of the best wins in the country. Also a quality loss. But still, I'm very concerned with Carson Beck. He has thrown a 3rd interception. He's thrown 3 interceptions in 3 games this season. They've won all of them. Not a good look, though. This is a little bit concerning for when they run into a team like a Miami. They're not going to be able to win that. If they run into a team like Oregon, they're not going to be able to deal with that. These are things that I'm worried about. Georgia, very good, but still, they need to control and they need to play clean football. At 2, it's Ohio State, a great win over a Penn State team that a lot of people had really highly ranked. I was lower on them, but still, a big win for Ohio State. The Buckeyes show that they really are there. They answered all my questions, to be completely honest with you, and they're the number 2 team, which leads, of course, the number 1 team, the team that separated themselves from everybody else all season long, the Oregon Ducks. The Ducks are the number 1 team in college football yet again, and no one is close to dethroning them. Till they lose, they're number 1, and I don't really see that happening this season. They don't really have another big test that I think is going to throw them, and a dominant win in the big house is just the cherry on top right there. The Oregon Ducks are the number 1 team, but let me know what you thought. Like I said, I think only 19 teams deserve to be ranked this week. Let me know what you thought, though. Love to hear your thoughts on my top 25. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL trade deadline. The trade deadline is right around the corner. The trade deadline, less than 24 hours away. We talk about some players on some teams that might be on the move. But let me know what you think. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the college football top 25 for week 11, right before the playoff committee comes out with theirs in just about 25 hours from now. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL. A crazy weekend, but more crazy, the deadline. The NFL trade deadline is tomorrow. Less than 24 hours from now, teams will be just about set. No more trades allowed to go through. I come here with a list of a good amount of players that I think have the potential to be on the move. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 4th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL trade deadline. The deadline is right around the corner, less than 24 hours to go. Who will belong on the same team? Who will be on the move? It's not always easy to tell. Trades can come out of nowhere. We had one where the Broncos traded outside linebacker Browning to the Cardinals, a team in the Broncos that I did not think would be sellers. That's not really a selling move, but a good move for them. That one came earlier today. Not a huge transaction, but still, it shows you trades can come from anywhere. This season, there is a record-tying amount of teams with 2 losses or less halfway through the season, with 9. So, just in general, we can assume that those are the sellers. So that's what I did. I looked through the rosters of all 9 of those teams. The Giants, the Patriots, the Saints, the Raiders, the Jags, the Panthers, the Browns, the Dolphins, and the Titans. Those 2-win teams fighting for the bottom, looking for the future, not this year. And I looked at all the players that had 1 year left on the deal, expiring after this season. And I thought, who might go? So I made a little list, and there are a couple of guys that I think are juicy for this trade deadline, and I think the biggest one, the last really big fish to go at this deadline, is going to be Azeez Ojulari. The Giants' former second-round pick has had one of his best seasons. He's come in relief after Kayvon Thibodeau went down, and he has played amazing football. Ojulari has always been a sack master. He has come in this season, 6 sacks already, only starting about 4 games. He has come in and dominated. He is in the top 5 for sacks before last week, in weeks 5 to 8. He was in the top 5 for sacks, along with 2 of his other teammates. That Giants defense has been hounding other quarterbacks, and Azeez Ojulari has been a huge part of that. 6 sacks on the season, and there are a couple of teams that could really use a pass rusher. Teams like the Lions, for instance, after losing a player like Aiden Hutchinson. An expiring contract for Azeez Ojulari, and he's going to get paid. Someone's going to pay him in the offseason. He's very, very good. As a Giants fan, I hope he doesn't go too far. But still, this is a guy that I think could fetch a day two pick, a second, third round pick kind of situation. Azeez Ojulari is, I think, the biggest fish left on the market, and I think the Lions are a team that could go out and get him. Outside of him, from the Giants, there aren't really any other names that really stand out. Adoree Jackson, a guy that hasn't started a single game due to injury, still has come in and played some quality snaps. He's a guy that was on the market for a long time. Not sure if he's really a guy that people want, but maybe a cornerback needy team will pull the trigger for cheap on an expiring contract. The other big name that I think might go, and it breaks my rules a little bit, but I heard a little bit of buzz about this, Marshawn Lattimore, cornerback for the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the madness that's going on with the Saints in our next segment in just a little bit. But Marshawn Lattimore, I think, is a prime target to get traded. His contract doesn't end this season, but still, he is an elite cornerback. He's one of the top 10 corners in the league, in my opinion, and there are plenty of teams out there that could use a corner. There are plenty of teams out there that could use a shutdown guy, whether it be a team like the Commanders, trying to make some kind of move to continue to improve on a magical season already. Some reports were that he was seen in Dulles, so maybe that trade is on the way. This is a guy that I would look for to get traded. His teammate and also former Washington player, Chase Young, is another player that I might look to get moved. He has a team option after this year. He was moved last season, traded to the 49ers. He's a guy, a defensive end, that if he gets into the right situation, might be really good. Look for him to maybe get moved for cheap this season as well. Outside of that, I think the big two that are going to get moved, again, just about 24 hours to the deadline. There's not a lot of time left. I think the big two are Azeez Ojulari and Marshawn Lattimore, but there's a couple more. Some smaller wide receivers that might get moved. Darius Slayton, Adam Thielen, guys like Tyler Boyd, Mike Williams might go to some wide receiver needy teams. I don't see a lot of them getting moved. Maybe you can throw KJ Osborne in the mix from the Patriots. These wide receiver 3-ish guys that might go to shore up a team. Maybe the Chiefs decide that they want another deep threat, pull the trigger on a Darius Slayton. Maybe they decide they want a veteran, pull the trigger on an Adam Thielen. These are the kind of moves that I think are going to happen more than the big ones. If you're looking for big ones, I think it's going to be Azeez Ojulari or Marshawn Lattimore. Outside of that, there's a couple of interesting ones that I think might be fun. The Texans are looking very bad on the offensive line. There's a couple of offensive linemen that fit my criteria. Again, a 2-win team and a player on a 1-year deal, an expiring deal. There are 2 players that fit that kind of description for the Texans. Not sure if this happens because these are kind of big names on the offensive line. Brandon Scherff from the Jaguars. We've already seen the Jags be willing to part ways with some players. They traded Cam Robinson to the Vikings. If we put together a similar package for the Texans, you can shore up that offensive line with a guy in Scherff who's a little bit older, but for a rental for this season, at least a temporary fix, could come in and be very effective, as well as on the Browns. And I think this is going to be like the prize horse if it happens. I don't really see it happening, but if it does, this would be crazy. Jedrick Wills, left tackle for the Cleveland Browns, fits that deal. The Browns, another team that not very good right now. They've already sold Amari Cooper. I don't think this is a season that they're really going to fight too hard for. You trade Jedrick Wills to the Texans, I think you can get quite the haul. It's going to be interesting to see if that happens. But those two are guys that, if we're looking more in fantasy land for the Texans, they kind of fit that criteria of a bad team and a player that's on an expiring deal that could really help that contender over there. And one more thing I wanted to point out. The Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys are a team that desperately needs some help. In the running back room, to be more specific, there are a couple running backs out there that I think maybe, again, they fit this criteria, this 1 year left on a 2-win team. Not all of them are going to be for trade, are going to be up on the market. For instance, Nick Chubb fits that deal. I don't think he's going to be on the market. But one that I saw that really piqued the interest, it doesn't quite fit. His deal expires in 2026. From the Panthers, Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders already kind of the backup in Carolina. They used Chuba Hubbard more than him. He's not getting the touches. You're about to get Jonathan Brooks back if you're the Panthers. If you can get off Miles Sanders for anything, I think the Cowboys are a team that would really love to get a guy like Miles Sanders. It's going to be pretty cheap. It's not going to be too much. I'm sure the Panthers wouldn't. I'm sure the Cowboys wouldn't mind eating some of the money. Maybe the Panthers eat some of the money, get a little bit of a better pick from that, but still, you get something from a guy that clearly has not worked out there. He's going to be operating as an RB3, RB4 for the future of this team. You get him out of there for something. The Cowboys desperate to make a move. That's one that I think could happen when I'm taking a look at everything. But let me know what you think. Which players do you think they're going to get moved? Which players on my list do you think should move? Who do you think shouldn't? Love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention over to coaching. There was a coach fired today by the name of Dennis Allen. The Raiders made some coaching adjustments as well. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 4th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over a couple of players that I think might be on the move at the trade deadline. Some offensive linemen, some pass rushers, and a couple of cornerbacks on the market. But before, in this segment, we are going to get into a little bit of the other news that came out of the NFL. We had our second coach fired of the season, Dennis Allen of the New Orleans Saints, fired after a disastrous loss to the Carolina Panthers, a team that has lost 7 straight, seemingly has lost the locker room, and the Raiders make some coaching changes as well. We'll talk about that and more, but before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 4th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to get into some of the head coaching changes that happened in the league earlier today. Obviously headlined by Saints former head coach now, Dennis Allen, getting fired. This is a move that we predicted early on in our seasons when we were doing our Saints preview. In the preseason, we predicted this. That's a checkbox for us. We take those wins. But this is a disaster season for the Saints. As we've been saying, the Saints should sell. The Saints are not in a position to really do anything. They are not in a position to reload like they've been desperately trying to do season over season over season, and they are a team that desperately needs some changes. And that change is the final goodbye, seemingly, of the Sean Payton era. Dennis Allen was the longtime defensive coordinator for Sean Payton. He's been there for a very long time, took over from him in the interim, became the head coach, kind of kept that same philosophy, that same culture in the building, and now he's gone. This kind of, I think, is the last tie to a bygone era when the Saints were winning, when the Saints were good, when they had a quality kind of structure and a good plan for the future. Right now, the Saints are stuck in the mud, and that mud is pulling them deeper and deeper down to the bottom of the league. This, I think, helps loosen them a little bit, helps them move on from the Sean Payton era that is gone and is not coming back. They need to move on, and they need to move on now, and I think this is a move that is long overdue. There was an absolute disaster, a explosion of awfulness from the Saints kind of sphere. Michael Thomas, former receiver, after Chris Olave gets hit for what seems like the 6th time in his career. He seems to attract these massive hits. It's not a good thing. He took a big one just a couple weeks ago. Now he's back. This one, yet again, he had to get carted off. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time he's been carted off of a field after a massive hit. Chris Olave is like a magnet for these things, and it's not good for the future of him. All hope is that he is okay, seemingly just fine. His movement is in extremities, everything seems fine, but an explosion of just hatred kind of came out of the Saints. Michael Thomas went on a Twitter tirade, right? He went out and started tweeting just about how bad Derek Carr is, basically. Then there were some tweets made by Saints players after the game, saying, hey, sorry we lost to the Panthers. That's unacceptable. New Orleans, you deserve better. That is a broken locker room. That is a broken team, and that is a team that needs to burn it all down. That is a team that needs to start fresh from the beginning and figure out what can we do to make this team better. What can we do to say, we are done with this era. We need to move on. And maybe that's cutting Derek Carr. That's a lot of money to eat, but maybe you just need to suck. And that's not a fun situation to be faced with. But it is about time that Dennis Allen is out of that building. That defense was not doing what they needed it to do. That defense was awful. And I'm not saying this is going to fix things, but a 7-game losing streak, any kind of change, any kind of scapegoat is something that they need to. In a season that's only halfway over, they are in desperation time. They can still make the moves they need to make. They can still kind of have a little bit of a fire sale, but I think it's a little bit late for that. I'm sure they want to have that fire sale. I'm sure they want to have that big move, get everybody out of there, but they don't have the books, the money to do that. They keep pushing it down the road, and I think it's time to pay the piper. The time is happening now. It's going to happen this offseason. They're going to be bad for a little bit, at least, and then they're going to come back. But this is the beginning of a dark period for the Saints, I think, and I don't think it's going to be good for quite a while. They've been staring down this kind of barrel for a while, and then it's finally fired at them. The Saints move on from Dennis Allen. The Raiders also make some coaching changes, firing their QB and offensive line coaches. That's not going to fix everything. The Raiders obviously have their issues with the quarterback position. Desmond Ridder came in to spell Gardner Minshew, has just not been the answer over there in Vegas, not as good as he was in Indianapolis. It's just not been great. And Antonio Pierce continues to be on the hot seat. I don't know how he's going to do. He's been fine. I'm sure the players like him, but it's not working out the way that they wanted it to, as the players kind of held a coup to make sure that he was the head coach heading into this season. We're not sure how that's going to go. I'm not sure how that's going to go. It's a little bit scary. If you are a part of this Raiders team, it just continues to go down the drain. Not a good look for everybody involved in all of these teams. Saints move on, Raiders move on, both desperation move, both definitely needed. Unlike the Jets, this was a head coaching firing that I think makes a lot of sense. But let me know what you think. Did Dennis Allen deserve to be fired? Did the Saints need to move on, and what does the future for both of these organizations look like? But let me know what you think. Again, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we finish off our show talking about Monday Night Football. A big game. The undefeated team, the last one in the league, the Chiefs, take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a game that really could go either way. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 4th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over Dennis Allen, the former head coach of the Saints, being fired. Now the former head coach, like we said. This is a big moment for the Saints. It finally feels like they are finally saying, okay, we're done. We're not competing anymore. And I think that is a time that's something they needed to accept for a while now. In this segment, we turn our attention to Monday Night Football, a big matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield and the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 4th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we finish off our show with a Monday Night Football preview. The Chiefs travel to Tampa to take on a Bucs team that is really limping. Obviously, we know all about their wide receiver injuries. This is a team that continues to struggle with it. They have come in now really with just one wide receiver. Cade Otton has really stepped up in the absence in the tight end position. He's played really good football in just the one game, but he's kind of been a more reliable target for Baker Mayfield. Look for him to have a big game against quietly what I think is the best defense in the NFL in the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins last week, had his best game of the season, and it wasn't really that close. They're going up against a Tampa Bay team that has given up over 30 points in back-to-back weeks. This is a Tampa Bay team that is not a stranger to giving up a lot of points and a lot of yards to quarterbacks and teams, and I think this Kansas City offense is going to have a heyday with them. This is going to be a shootout, just like every other Tampa Bay game has been. The question is, can the Tampa Bay team, this offense, keep it close against what I think, again, is the best defense in the league? They're going to need a big game out of Cade Otton. They're going to need a big game out of their running backs, especially against a Kansas City unit that has been very, very stingy against the run, against a Kansas City unit that has not allowed a real running back to go off. Now, the Atlanta Falcons had a good running day, but when push came to shove, they were unable to get past that really elite linebacking core. They make a trade for a linebacker after a couple of them go down, so maybe look for a big game from some of the running backs, whether that be from Rachaad White, whether that be from Bucky Irving or Sean Taylor, whichever one of those guys is going to step up. I think one of those three, Cade Otton, need to have a big game. Now, don't sleep on the wide receivers for the Bucs either. McMillan on the outside has come up big in a couple of moments, but he's not really a wide receiver one. Sterling Shepard has had these experiences with a very similar looking wide receiver core over his career in the Giants, where he's had to step up, but he's more of a wide receiver two kind of guy as well. Trey Palmer as a deep threat. This is a team that's going to need a lot from the short game. They're going to need a lot from their tight end, and they're going to need to break tackles against, a really good Kansas City defense. On the Kansas City side, I kind of previewed it a little bit earlier when I talked about DeAndre Hopkins. He comes in, and immediately that offense looks better. Patrick Mahomes has by far his best game of the season with DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins didn't really even do too much, but his gravity helped open up all the other receivers. Even without Rashee Rice there, his ability to get open quickly and find those open spots in the zone and know how to play against a defense, be a smart wide receiver, get to the spots where Patrick Mahomes wants him to be, that is something that he has been missing for a long time. Travis Kelce has not been the same. He still has those moments, but they need that guy in a DeAndre Hopkins, and that offense hits a completely different switch when he's out there. Kareem Hunt, look for him to have a big game as well. They've given up a lot of yards to running backs. Obviously, Derrick Henry's going to have a big game against everyone, but he had a huge game, especially in the fourth quarter against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. This is a team that, if it focuses, can stop the run, but they're gonna have their hands full with the pass, and it's not going to be enough. Kareem Hunt out in the flat, I think, might have a big game. This is a Kansas City team that I think is really going to explode for the first time on offense. When taking a look at this game in totality, the Chiefs favored by 8.5 points right now, and I think that's a good number. Earlier, when we did our predictions on Sunday, or on Friday, I should say, I had the Chiefs winning 24-30. But the more and more I talk about this, the more I take a look at this game, I think this is going to be a game where the Chiefs offense finally shows up, where the Chiefs offense that we have been scared was going to be there all season long finally pops up. I think they end up dominating this game. I think they win. Still a 24 spot for Tampa, a solid day for them, but I think Kansas City ends up putting up 38 points on them, win by 14, 38-24. But let me know what you think of this game. It should be a fun one, irregardless of the score. Lots of scoring, at least from one end, and lots of big plays. I am excited for it. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. College basketball kicked off tonight. We didn't have time to talk about that. We'll talk about that tomorrow after we do our NFL winners and losers and our power rankings, of course. So make sure you come back for all of that. Enjoy college basketball. Enjoy the NBA. Enjoy Monday Night Football. Enjoy the trade deadline. Have a great day. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network, and I will see you then. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go.
Bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit.